smoke $500 worth of dope a day, $400 or $500, you hear voices too. But I had been in and out of mental institutions, and I always had, when I went to this one particular hospital, I always had this one doctor. And I'm going to say his name. I said I wasn't going to say his name because I might get him in trouble. Oh, well. His name is Dr. Head. He's from Detroit. He was my psychiatrist for years. And one time I went to jail under one of my many aliases, and I went and did what I always did. I asked to see the psychiatrist so I could get enough medication to sleep my time away. And so when I walked in, he didn't know it was me because I was there under an alias. And he looked and he was like, oh my goodness. And I sat down and I started my little spiel about the voices and all of that. And usually he humored me whenever I would go in for those hospital stays, my week hospital stays, which were really big vacations for me while I was using. This particular time, in the middle of me talking, he stood up and slammed the desk in front of me. Now, he's the one who had told me earlier, years before, that I was a paranoid schizophrenic. He slammed the desk in front of me. He said, there's nothing wrong with you. Anisha, there is nothing wrong with you. And then he sat back down and he wrote out the prescription for my medication for paranoid schizophrenia. And he went back into act, and he went back into what he do. And he said, Anisha, I'll see you in 2 weeks, and I'm going to. And he just went right back into character, okay? But I walked back down to my room, back down to the ward where I was in, and I was thinking, what does he mean? What does he mean there's nothing wrong with me? He told me I was a paranoid schizophrenic. I'm smoking crack. I'm standing on the corner. I've tried to kill myself several times. What's going on? But the technological rebuilding had begun. And so I went to, the last treatment center I went to was Lakeshore Hospital in Chicago, Illinois. And they had the technology. They had a doctor on staff, a medical doctor, a nurse, an MSW therapist, a certified addiction counselor who was a recovering addict, and a psychiatrist. That was their team approach. They had the technology. I had been in and out of treatment for years. I lost count of how many treatment centers I had been in. And in this particular, because I had been in so many treatment centers, and every treatment center I went to in Detroit, they would make me residential staff. I had office skills. They would put me in the office, or they would make me staff because I could teach group. I was very articulate. You know, yeah, I've been in treatment 59 times. Of course I can run a group. But I would be the first one high whenever I got out. And so once again, at Lakeshore Hospital, I was the president of the ward, you know, running everything. But this one particular recovering addict who was a certified addiction counselor, he put me in a fishbowl one day. He set me in the middle of the room, and he tore me up. He said, you can articulate the literature, you can talk the book, but you can't control your life. And he took me down, and I was sitting there crying. I felt humiliated. He said, you're not doing any work. You're going around preaching to everybody. You have the answer for everybody, but you can't save yourself. He had the technology. Because the next day we had drama therapy. And for the first time in years, instead of advising everyone else in group, I raised my hand and said, I would like to put my mother in the chair. And the next day, I put my molester in the chair. They had the technology. For the first time, I was in my 30s, I started addressing the trauma that had me standing on Woodward Avenue. When I left that treatment center, I haven't used any minor mood-altering substances since. It's been 10 and a half years. They had the technology. They were not afraid to address the trauma. It wasn't trauma-informed therapy. It was trauma-addressing therapy. They addressed the trauma. When I came back home, my family sent me to Grand Rapids. They didn't even tell me I was going. They had my adult daughter drive down, and when she was in the driveway, they said, pack your bags. They didn't think I could stay clean in Detroit. They were right. When I went to Grand Rapids to stay with my adult daughter, who I'd abandoned at 7 because of drugs, it didn't work, okay? It didn't work. She had some pain. It was valid, but I couldn't feel her pain and stay clean. I had 2 months clean. So I went to a 12-step meeting, and they had the technology. They told me about a recovery house, and I moved into the recovery house. And the woman who ran the recovery house had the technology. She began a process of rebuilding me for 2 years. She reparented me for 2 years. She gave me everything that I didn't get in my mother's home, and she did it in 2 years. She nurtured me, but it was not self-determination. She didn't ask me, what do you want to do? She told me what I must do. You have to be up at 8 o'clock. I do not care that you get Social Security disability. There's nothing wrong with you, Anisha. There was nothing wrong with you when you were jumping in and out of cars, getting money, and taking it to the drug dealer. You're going to get up every day. I don't need your money. You will either go to work, or you will go to school, or you will volunteer somewhere. You will do chores. She had a list of things that I had to do. And even though I've never been a lazy person, I've needed her to mandate some things for me. I did not need to self-determine what I should do. I needed some directives because I had a distorted sense of self that was trying to kill me. And so I stayed there for 2 years, and I wanted to go to college. So I said, I'm not going to work. I want to go to college. I have a small income that can support me while I go get an education. I had worked in corporate America before I started smoking crack, but I had graduated high school from a school that was in New Life for Girls. I went to a place called New Life for Girls, which is a spinoff from Teen Challenge, when I was a teenager, and I completed their high school. And then in Detroit, I completed DBI, Detroit Business Institute, and I had got secretarial training. And so I had worked in corporate America. But when I got clean, before crack, but when I got clean and tried to go to college, I found out that the school was not accredited. Somehow that slipped past DBI and they let me in. But the college was like, no, that school was not accredited. We cannot take your diploma from that school. So someone who had worked in corporate America, I had to humble myself and go get a GED. But West Middle, where I got my GED in Grand Rapids, they had the technology. The day before I took my last GED test, and I did them in a week. I finished my GED in a week. I took one test. They only let you take, well, I finished it in 4 weeks, I'm sorry. You could only take one test a week, but I just took them back to back. The last test, I needed to prep. It was math, so I was doing a little prepping. And a lady came and sat next to me in the room where I was prepping. She sat down and she said, I'm here to sign you up for college. She didn't ask me, are you interested in going to college? She didn't say, would you like to go to college? Have you ever heard of this particular college? She pulled the paperwork out and she started filling it out. She looked at me, she said, name. And I was like, Anisha Freeman. Address. And I mean, I thought it was the rule or something. So I answered her, and when she got down to, what do you want to do? I was like, I don't know. Well, back when I was a secretary, they had these computer things they had this thing called DW3 and DW4. That's how long it had been since I had been on a computer. And she said, computer, applications technology. And she signed me up for college. So I began college. And I went to Grand Rapids Community College, and they had the technology. When I took the placement test, one of the questions on the placement test was 2 minus 10. I skipped it because I thought it was a trick question. I was like, you can't do that. Knock it off. And I went on. So that's how far back I was as it relates to math. They had the technology. They had a math teacher who I went to, and he said, Anisha, he saw me struggling. He came over, he said, write the number line on every one of your papers. To this day, I have a folder with a stack of papers that has a number line all the way around it. He said, write a 0 and then write 1, 2, 3, 4. And I did it all the way around the paper to 20. He said, now go to the other side of the paper and write -1, -2. And I did that all the way to -20. He said, put your hand on the 2. He said, 2 minus 10. Now count back. He said, and you count the 0 also. And I would sit there in my class, and I did that on every page. And some of the other students, straight from high school, would look over and be hitting each other and giggling and laughing. And I would look at them and be like, now I got to start over. So then I go back, 1, 2. And I went to the math lab at 8 o'clock on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, because my math class was Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9:40. So I would go from 8 and I would sit there till 9:30, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, until I got an A. In fact, all of my classes were A's because I graduated summa cum laude with an associate's in a year and a half. They had the technology. After I left, and for my internship, I interned with Delta Strategy. They're no longer in operation, but Delta Strategy. And during the internship, I was working really, really, really hard, and I would hear them talking and whispering in the background, and I thought they were saying something bad, so I started working harder. And what I found out years later was that they were standing in the corner saying, my God, she's phenomenal. She's done a year's worth of work in 3 months. I thought they were saying something bad. And so they were all on boards and committees. They were connected to people who ran Grand Rapids. And there was a gentleman sitting on one of their boards listening to them talk about me. He said, well, if she's that good, send her to me. I need her. That man was Reverend George K. Hartwell, who is now the Honorable Reverend George K. Hartwell, because he was running for mayor at the time. So I went and interviewed with him, and I had a shoddy, spotty resume, and I had no way to account for the 15-year gap in my resume. And so he looked it over. He's a very smart man. He said, it looks like you've had some problems in your past, Anisha, but based on your references from your internship and based on your transcripts, I'm going to give you a try. And I worked as his personal assistant for 3 years. A couple months after I became his assistant, he became mayor of the Grand Rapids, Michigan. So 2 years out of the crack house, I was the personal assistant to the mayor of Grand Rapids, Michigan. I went back to school and got my bachelor's degree. During that period of time, I also came across a woman, and her name is Marla. And she's sitting here in the audience today, who became my mentor. See, the woman who had mentored me the first couple of years at the recovery house, there's some people who are in your life for a reason and for a season, and some people for a lifetime. The woman who had me the first 2 years, I love her to death. We no longer talk to each other. She's not in my life. There's some things that have went down between us where we don't communicate. I still appreciate what she did for me, but her season was over. And when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And Marla appeared at a particular time in my life when I really needed someone to take me to the next level. And she's been mentoring me ever since. And what the technology that Marla had was that Marla had a very strong personality, and I've always been attracted to people with a strong personality because my mother had a strong personality, my abuser had one, and I've always been attracted to strong people and trying to fix my script with them. So I thought that it would be the same type of relationship, but I didn't know I was safe. And I did with her what I've always done with people. I tried to buy her. So the first couple times that we met and talked about her mentoring me, I picked up the check. The third time I tried to do it, she said, Anisha, why are you always picking up the check? I'm picking up the check today. She said, do you think you can buy me? She said, I'm not for sale, Anisha. I don't need your money. And in the middle of the restaurant, she said, you're safe. And I started bawling right there in the middle of the restaurant. And she has helped me so much. She taught me how to set boundaries with people. I didn't know how to do that. I would just let stuff build up until I cussed you out, right? And she taught me how to address things exactly when they happened. She had the technology. She taught me how to walk into a room and raise my eyebrows and set a boundary with the entire room. She had the technology. And during that time, as I finished my bachelor's degree, George Hartwell, he would ask me for my report card every term. And whatever class I took, he would give me an assignment based on what I had just learned. So when I finished technical writing class, he walked up to me one day and he said, Anisha, draft me a letter to the neighborhood associations on my stance on crime. And he turned around and walked out the door before I could say anything. And I'm sitting there nervous, like, no, you dictate on a tape, and then I put the headphones on, and then I type, and that's how this works, right? And he was pushing me. He pushed me every day out of my comfort zone. He challenged me to do something different. And so I typed it, and I started getting excited as I typed it, and he only circled 2 words to change. He had the technology. He said, Anisha, he threw me his keys, go to the airport and pick up one of our funders that's coming in. And I had a little hoopty, and I didn't even know how to use. I'd never had a car with a remote. And he said, come on, I'm going to show you which car it is. So I'm following them out to the parking lot, and I accidentally pushed the panic button, and the hood popped up, the trunk popped up, the horn started blowing, and the lights started flashing. And I did like this instantly, right? Because I'm used to being harshly critiqued or hit for making a mistake. And he just said, that's the panic button here. Get out of here before you're late. And so as I'm driving to the airport, I'm thinking, you mean to tell me that I have a right to make a mistake? That I can make a mistake and I can still be trusted? That you still have faith and confidence in me? That I'm not a dumb door, a stupid hussy, and an ignorant slut like somebody told me every time I made a mistake? He had the technology. Because there was a gift inside of me that was being birthed, and I didn't understand it, I didn't know it, but I needed to be able to make mistakes.